membership coordinator is a fairly private person. However, one thing I can say, because it is in the public domain, is that he's an avid outdoorsman, and that's camper, boater, photographer, and he's built his own outrigger sailing canoe. That's not a conventional type of craft, but it's quite appropriate to the kind of adventures he has outdoors. So it's obviously the next step in dabbling around with powered craft would be to look at something that doesn't generate a lot of gas stink in the pristine outdoor environment he goes to, and so this is a very natural endeavor for him, and we'll let him talk about it tonight. Dave?
Dave, did you want the lights on or off?
Off would be good.
Oh.
Yeah. So, thinking about electric boats, most boats you see these days, and this was sort of the thought process that I had to go through when I was planning this boat. Most boats you see are out on the water, either sailboats, which actually take quite well to having an electric auxiliary engine, or power boats, which generally don't, because they're designed as planing hull. So they're designed to get up on top of the water and plane, and in order to do that, you need a lot of power. And you can do it with an electric engine, electric motor, but the batteries won't last for very long. You know, you'd have to have a car-sized pack, and you could only expect to plane, you know, say a 16 or 18 foot boat for an hour at the most, off a $20,000 battery. So it's not done very often unless it's a race boat, possibly short duration. So in order to find something that will work with electric, you have to find something efficient. And this is a good example of an efficient boat. And it's because it's a displacement hull, so it's not designed to get up and plane on top of the water. It's designed to move through the water efficiently without making a lot of waves. If you see a boat making a lot of waves, that's coming from excess energy that is making waves and not producing a lot of thrust for the boat. So this is called a sneak easy, and it's long and thin, and it works really well for an electric boat. And I didn't do, my budget was very limited on this, so, and I didn't want to build a boat. This is probably a hand-built boat, so it's not something I did. This is something I came across on the internet. So this is a lightweight 16-foot planing hull, and this guy actually converted it with about a 15 horsepower motor, and his goal was to pull water steer. And he actually succeeded in pulling water steer. But the duration for 72 volt, 100 amp hour battery is 3 to 5 miles on plane. So very limited. And the problem with a boat like this, if you slow it down and it comes down off a plane, it'll work just fine, except that you notice the transom right here, it's not streamlined. So this boat is designed plane, and it works really well like that. But if you're going slowly, what happens is it draws water in at the back of the hull, and basically it's like it sucks itself backwards. So it's not an efficient way to go. Here's the motor on that boat. This was done actually fairly cheaply. I think this is StepX motor. So that's what he used. And the other problem he had, I noticed, is overheating. So he could not plane for more than a few minutes without the motor overheating, and it would have required liquid cooling. There's another, I thought this was pretty funny.
That's a torpedo, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a torpedo motor, so that is the sort of most advanced electric outboard motor you can buy. This guy's solution was to build a very small boat, and you could plane it with the torpedo. This is something I saw when I was thinking about what to do. So this boat, it was designed to coach dragon boats and rowboats, and they can't have a big weight because they don't want to disturb the boat that they're coaching. And it's a catamaran, so it's an efficient haul, and that was something that put me in the mind of this. This is something else I found on the internet. So this is basically what I chose to do, something similar to this. And this is a Hobie, I think it's about a 16.5-foot Hobie beach cat, they call it, so it's a sailboat. But they took the mast off and converted it into electric boat. And again, you can see the torpedo motor on the back there. This, I thought was pretty sexy. This is a full carbon fiber planing boat with dual torpedo motor. So I looked at the price of the drivetrain. So those two motors and the battery to power them, you're looking at about $17,000. And your cruising speed, 8.6 knots, range 17 miles, full speed 14 knots, and range 15 miles. So it's pretty modest as far as range and speed goes for $17,000 plus the boat. And that's the torpedo. One of the advantages to this motor is that the motor is actually underwater. It's about equivalent to something like a 8 to 9 horsepower outboard motor. But because the motor's underwater, it's very quiet, and it's got a state-of-the-art control system. You're looking at about $3,700 for that.
So the question I've always got when you put a motor in the water,
Yep.
is how do you seal it and keep the water out?
They seem to be pretty good at that. All the trolling motors that you see, electric trolling motors, are all underwater.
Like the Minn Kotas and things like
Yeah,
that?
Minn Kota, yeah. It can be an issue, but, you know, with triple seals and probably some sort of air passage up.
Well, no, you can also have,
Oh,
the
oil.
motor has to be designed properly, because you don't put mineral oil,
Yeah.
Right,
so that becomes a conduction fluid, keep the motor cool.
Right.
gotcha.
Although the other thing is, the guys who were doing the speedboat racing down in Washington, they didn't do anything, they just let the motor go underwater. Because as long as they were in fresh water,
Okay.
the electrical path was such a high resistance, the motor didn't care.
Right.
Salt water would probably be more of an issue, but probably more for corrosion than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were making well pump motors down in the bottom of wells for.
That's right, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't really think it's such an issue. This, the neat thing about this motor is it's a lot like the RC motors. It's what they call a brushless outrunner.
Right.
Super high power in a small package, and then it's got a reduction gear. And this is very similar in power and RPM to what I did. So I used the propeller from this. Instead of trying to figure out sort of the best propeller, I figured that they'd already figured out the best propeller given the power and the RPM, and I bought one of these propellers and used it. So there's the boat that I bought, and I bought it at Jericho as an ex-rental for like $800, and I sold off the sails and the mast and rigging and everything for about $500.
Hey, smart guy.
So there's the plan. And it largely came out like that, except I didn't end up using the rudder. So the whole idea behind this, so there's a map of Vancouver area, was as a commuter boat. So it's not actually for me to explore nature with, unfortunately. It wasn't even built for me, it was built for my sister, who lives right up there on Indian Arm. And they're deep coast, so they commute twice a day, well, there and back, generally, in a powerboat, and it costs them about $7 worth of gas each way. So $14 a day in gas, just for that, and it's about 5 miles. So it's pretty ridiculous amount of gas. If people are coming up on the weekend, they go down and pick them up, so that's 2 trips up and down, you know, $30 in gas, 3 trips. There's a closer view of, so there's Deep Cove, and the power stations on Indian Arm, and they're right in there. So the goal was to go from there to there in a reasonable amount of time, which I figured was going to be half an hour to 40 minutes, something like that, whereas it takes them about 20 minutes in the powerboat. So there's the boat coming home and set up in the backyard. And at the same time I started with the motor. So I got this motor off of eBay for what I thought was a good price, but it never actually worked. And it's a mystery. I ended up having to take it apart and replace the hall sensor inside, and it still didn't work, and I sent it to the vendor of the controller in California. They couldn't make it work. The hall sensor tested out fine. I bought a new motor from the motor vendor, so the people who distribute it. It's called a Mars brushless motor, and they sent me a controller, and it worked with that controller, but it would not work with the controller that I used on the boat. So in any case, it was a bit of a frustration and a time. It took like 6 months of fussing around trying to make this thing work.
So your recommendation is to buy the motor and controller from the Mars people?
Yes, definitely. Because even the experts, the people who do this all the time, could not make it work.
Okay.
They told me that they could tear the motor apart and try to find out, but it wasn't worth the time for them to do it, because it doesn't come apart easily.
Right.
You have to press it apart, and by the time they do that, it's not worth their effort. So, yes, what I would recommend is buying the motor and controller as a package, because you know that it's going to work. And if it doesn't work, you can phone one person and say, this doesn't work. Whereas if you buy them from different people, they can always go to the other guy and say, well, it's his motor that's not working, right?
So how many horsepower would that motor be then?
That is 6 horsepower. And 6 horsepower continuous, 12 horsepower peak. So this is the outboard motor that I use. So it's an old Mercury 929 motor. This is the adapter. So what you do with these is, yes, you pull the old gasoline engine off. You cut the end of the crankshaft off because it has a fitting that will fit on the shaft that goes down into the leg. And you might be able to just see in the middle there, which is a sleeve, and that's the end of the crankshaft, and that fits into this coupler, which is called a Lovejoy coupler.
So is that red piece at the bottom of your motor, basically?
Yeah, that's the leg, so the propeller sits on the bottom of that.
Right.
So there's a better view. So basically what you need to do is make two plates up. One that bolts to the motor and one that bolts to the electric motor. So one that bolts to the outboard motor and one bolts to the electric motor, and then some spaces in between, and you join them together. So there's the plate on the motor, and the other side of the coupler. That coupler has a plastic, they call it a spider. That's the this thing here, and it fits into fingers on the other. So it allows you to have a little bit of misregistration of the two without running into a big problem.
Does it also offer you some kind of protection against sudden stoppage of the motor if it hits something?
No. You can get ones that are softer rubber, but they're not rated for the power.
Okay.
So this is a hard plastic.